Hello, Natalie. How are you?
Hi, I am doing well. Thank you for having me.
Looks like while I was just talking there was the glitch that has happened a couple times here on StreamYard, and that's the audio. So what I was just saying to bring forward the great Natalie Beisner, if you were not able to hear it, it looks like there's audio now. If you were
Yeah.
not able to hear it, is that, folks, she is this content creator. I found her on Instagram. She was over on the left, and she was able to think for herself. Smart woman, and you'll find that out here today as we chat with her. She investigated. She looked at these ideas that the left, the anti-whites, presented, and she came to some conclusions that, of course, they were not happy with. And then she decided to take it to the world, and we're so happy she did. Natalie, will you tell folks, maybe just a little synopsis about yourself and how you got started, and then we'll get into some of these ideas?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Southern California, and I was an actress for a very long time. Did a lot of theater, and in around 2017, 2018, I remember hearing the phrases white privilege and white fragility and things like that for the first time, and that kind of stuck with me and didn't sit totally right with me because it doesn't match my experience. And I saw it especially in Hollywood and in theater. But then, of course, everything that we see in Hollywood and in theater, especially among the acting world, it expands outward. And it wasn't enough to make me question anything at the time, but it was part of why I left acting, not the main reason. But it played into it because it was very clear that there was only room for certain voices. There was only interest in certain stories. And then in 2020, summer 2020 was what really shifted me. I had been totally on board with, I live in Los Angeles still, and the response to COVID was obviously very stringent. And I had been on board initially, even though I had lost jobs and not realized at the time I would never get them back. And I need my jobs, shockingly, I guess.
Right.
And summer 2020, when I was told I could go out and protest or riot, but I couldn't go to work, that felt like a betrayal because I had been doing everything, quote unquote, right as far as COVID goes. And I had been staying home. I lived in a weird living situation at the time, which of course I know that was another domino effect of the whole thing, is people living in maybe untenable situations at home. And then you just tell them to stay home. But I had been doing my part. And I thought, this is crazy that I can go out and protest. And I want you to be able to peacefully protest in America, obviously, whether I agree with the cause or not. And really, I at the time, I was very liberal. I would have probably been very much on board with BLM and what they were protesting that summer. But I'm not on board with the rioting, and I'm not on board with being told that I can't go to work, and that if I want to go to work, there was this weird narrative that you were racist if you wanted the lockdowns to stop, and that it was like wealthy white women who wanted to go get their hair done, they were the only people who had problems with lockdowns. And it blew my mind, because it's like, obviously your job is essential to you. So the hairdresser's job, whatever color he or she may be, their job is essential to them. And obviously people of all colors go to get their hair done. So it seemed like a very odd thing to color racism over, this response to COVID that was hurting a lot of people. So it really flipped a switch in me, and I walked away from the Democrat Party. And every day since then, I've been proven that was a correct choice to make. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of the hypocrisy and a lot of the racism and a lot of they claim to be this, very compassionate for the underdog, for the minority. But I think so often what they claim and what their policies actually do are two different things. So that was it in a nutshell. I'm sorry that took longer than I meant for it to.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's actually very interesting because you mentioned a couple things there for me that really caught my ear. Seeing the hypocrisy of the superficial claim that this is for the good of everyone, and this is, and also this is, when it came to COVID, this is just about the disease, the illness, and then cloaking that with or just meshing it into other anti-white and race-related things, where it seemed wholly out of place. And then, of course, the rioting and these attacks on the cities and the burning. I'm sure you probably heard about like libraries being burned in cities. Like, what does that have to do with anything else aside from destroying the West. So these things all sort of came together for you,
Mhm.
even in a place as radically leftist or anti-white as LA, and that
Yeah.
opened your eyes.
Yeah, I don't think it would have happened. I like to think it would have eventually happened over the course of the past 3 years, but I don't think it would have happened in quite the same way if I didn't live in Los Angeles, because the hypocrisy was so blatant. And I watched as the riots were happening in late May, early June. I watched these mom and pop shops and these independent stores that had just barely been permitted to open. And here I thought this was the side again of the small business and the underdog. Like I said, they had just barely been allowed to open with all of these restrictions. And then I watched them board up their windows again. I saw the signs that said Black owned business, which is crazy to me that you would ever feel the need to put that on. Like,
Right.
pass over me because this is Black owned, go to another small business because it's
Yeah.
not Black owned. I mean, and I just thought this is clearly bad for everyone in the community, especially right now during this unprecedented time, during this global health crisis, we're told. And
Yeah.
then the doctors signing letters, not every doctor, of course, but there was doctors who signed letters saying, don't shut this down. It's a historical moment. And any way you sliced it, it just was so nonsensical, because it's like, okay, so do you want these people to die of COVID? These BLM adjacent people, you want them to die of COVID during this global health crisis? Or is it really not the health crisis that you say that it is? So it's okay, but you're just keeping us locked down for other reasons. And obviously a lot has come out since then, but any way you sliced it, it did not look good, and it made no sense whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, precisely. And it's interesting that you moved away from the totality of the ideology. It wasn't just like you felt like, well, this part of this leftist or whatever it might be is okay. You saw how it was all sort of interconnected and worked together to move toward objectives that were harmful to indeed
Mhm.
the people they were claiming to help, and harmful to our country, harmful to everyone that lived in it, the businesses.
Yes. Yeah. I always like to be clear that it didn't happen overnight. I didn't just get burned by one side of the aisle, so I jumped to the other. It just, like I said, hearing that in 2017, 2018, hearing this talk about white privilege and being told that I had a certain life story that I didn't have, or that my life story didn't matter as much, or something like that, that really had stayed with me. And like I said, I stayed on the left for a long time. I didn't question it after. But 2020 felt like a highlight of all of that. It felt
Mm,
like here I am struggling with no job, struggling in terms of mental health. And again, this is the side that claims to care about mental health.
all right.
Struggling with staying home. I had a grandmother die, alone,
Mm,
isolated, all of these things that we now see as if we shouldn't have expected it before, all of these effects that the lockdowns had. And to be told in the middle of all that, that I should go read How to Be an Anti-Racist or White Fragility or something, it really just, it blew my mind. It would have been bad any other time, but while we were all staying home, while we were all told to do our part, while we were all just not being listened to if we had any other concern besides COVID. And like I said, I really was a diehard Democrat, a diehard leftist, and I was totally on board with the COVID response. But this really, it just felt like such a betrayal. And that did open my eyes to, well, maybe the side that claims to be for me is not for me. And I started listening to other voices, and I realized, no, it's not isolated to the race thing, which is huge, or the COVID thing, which is obviously huge. It's really everything. I agree with the conservative position on most issues. So it was really a year and a half long process that my eyes were opened.
fascinating. Have you seen, and if so, what part do you think it's played in your eyes opening this uh, escalating uninterest or disinterest in incorporating white females in this like privileged group and privileged these are the people that are also oppressed, the white female. We've noticed as we look out across the time frame of our lives, and certainly our parents and grandparents' lives, that white females initially were very much part of the oppressed group. And you saw feminism played a big part, as we consider a subset of anti-whiteism, played a big part in luring white women into this melange of sort of like warriors against all things Western, all things that the white race had sort of projected onto the world. And increasingly, we're seeing videos where white women are asked to leave the room when the victim group people are going to come together at work, at university. Have you seen that personally? And did that also sort of chafe you and realization that, wait a second, this is bad for all of us as a consequence. It's not just the white guys out there that are going to suffer.
Yeah. I see that so much online, and it is part of what I felt I experienced in 2017, 2018, when I was still very much trying to act, is this idea that even white women are not, I personally obviously don't believe that women in the West, modern day West, are oppressed at all, but this idea that even white women are part of the oppressor class, and we don't really need to tell their stories as actors and as artists. And I see it all over online now. I mean, white woman tears and all of this stuff, white women weaponizing their tears and their victimhood. And of course, Karen, which in my opinion is a type of racial slur. So yeah, it is an interesting, this idea of intersectional feminism. That was also something that I heard first around 2017, 2018. And that Black women are the intersection of all oppression, and, listen to Black women. We have this weird listen to women thing, but also listen to Black women most of all. And I see it so often on the left that it seems like every interaction in a leftist mind is, okay, who's the most oppressed? And then we're going to take that person or that group side. So even when it's, Dave Chappelle versus the trans community, well, he's a Black man, but the trans community is more oppressed, so we're going to go over there. It seems like every single, and that's why there is no coherence, there is no cohesion, because it's just, let me see who I deem to be the most oppressed, and I will go on that side. So if it's a white woman versus a Black man, I guess, the white woman's always going to lose out. But if it was a white woman versus a white man, and it's just a very anti-God and a really poor way to view the world.
Yeah, it absolutely is. You mentioned God there. I do want to speak, but since you mentioned God, I do want to speak about how feminism informed your opinions about the world, and in one way, and then how that exact same feminism informed your new views about the world. Because I see you make a lot of great videos on Instagram, folks, and we have the links, everybody, for Natalie's Instagram and YouTube right in the description, so check it out. But you make a lot of great videos. You talk a lot about feminism, but you did mention God there, and I wanted to ask, what part has Christianity played for you in your transformation? And were you a non-practicing Christian? Were you like a cultural Christian like many Americans before deciding that all of this, that especially you see in LA, is what's destroying the country and something has to be done? How did that play out for you?
I was raised Catholic, and I went to Catholic school. For a long time, I actually wanted to be a nun when I grew up. But like many people, I left the church around 18 or 19. It also coincided with what was sort of what was the scandal in the Catholic Church, and all of that coming to light about how it had been handled. So I think I sort of used that as an excuse to rebel at 18, 19. And I was agnostic or even atheist for a very long time. And interestingly, my political shift sort of predated my religious shift of coming back to Christ. When I was in that mode in 2020, 2021 of listening to all these voices that I had written off before or didn't even know existed, I just, for the first time, wanted to open my Bible in a long time, which I never thought would have happened. I also wanted to go to church, which was easier said than done in Los Angeles in 2020, 2021, which is, I'm not happy to say, that was a challenge. But it just, what I realized even prior to the stuff about feeling left out of the acting industry, or prior to COVID or anything like that, I was very unhappy. I was very discontent. I had followed a lot of what my generation had been told to do and would make you happy, and how women are supposed to behave, which is really no way at all, just behave like men and do everything a man does. And I had been left dissatisfied. So I think there was, as we often hear spoken of, a hole in my life, in my heart, where God should have been. And it took 2020, for better or worse, for me to realize it and realize there is a better way to live than the way that I had been living and the way that so many of us, especially in Los Angeles, like you mentioned, had been living. And I think feminism is one of the worst things that's happened to the Western world.
Well, amen to that. We can attest to that. Just about every guy, especially white guys, every one of us have suffered with feminized women to one degree or another. And the challenge to a natural relationship, and as a consequence, kind of the destruction of the family.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. It all ties together, and so much of, I think women so often are like the first casualties of these lies that we tell. And then when women fall, men fall, and what's good for women is good for men, and what's good for men is good for women, but we don't tend to view it that way. And I mean, women nowadays, I say this often, we should be happier than our mothers, certainly than our grandmothers. We have more rights. Even before the fall of Roe, which so many people think took away their rights, quote unquote, we have more rights than any other group of women in the history of the world. And we are the least satisfied. And I'm unsure what territory is left to conquer as far as Western women. And then suddenly we will be happy. It is this perpetual victimhood that really has no end in sight. I don't know what we're still fighting for. And it turns out there are differences between men and women. And when you ignore those differences, it doesn't benefit anyone.
Yeah, go figure. There are differences between men and women. What a strange concept. It's kind of like it's been handed down for millennia, this knowledge. And then it was we could have you back just to talk. In fact, it would be a very interesting conversation just to talk about feminism. But I wonder if you might give sort of an overview here. I alluded to it a moment ago, but sort of like feminism pro to con. You know, like at some point in your life, were you aware that a lot of these like female sort of like and domination ideas were feminist, like they had a label, and you were living with it because that's what society said, and then realized that, okay, these are the ideas that are really to a large part wrecking things. Is that how it happened for you?
Yeah. When I was younger, I considered myself a feminist, and I thought it was, I was in Catholic school. I thought it was very cool to say these things that, women don't need men. And really it was because I was so young and stupid, and also was insecure around boys and if they would like me back and that kind of thing. And then I went to college, and like I said, I was an actress. So I wasn't a raging feminist. I wasn't a zealot in the streets, but I don't think we question a lot of these ideals. I mean, even if you're not raised in Southern California necessarily, I mean, if you're a millennial, I don't think people would question, should you be having indiscriminate sex with whoever you want? Can I say that? Like people, even they don't even consider these feminist ideals necessarily. It's just we have grown up post-sexual revolution, and a lot of people who may or may not consider themselves feminists, if you said, well, maybe you should wait until you're married. Maybe women do have more physically at stake when it comes to physical intimacy. So maybe women should behave that way. That's not even considered like a feminist ideal. It's just considered like, how can you say that? You're so prudish. How can you possibly say that? And so I didn't consider myself really a feminist or a non-feminist for a long time. I just had these ideas, and I would never have questioned them of course, men and women are equal. And of course, women can do everything a man can do. And I was raised, to go to college right after high school. And this is a very unpopular opinion, but I don't think that girls should necessarily go to college right after high school. And I'm not saying stop girls from going to college. I don't think anyone should go to college unless you absolutely have to. But women are on a biological clock that men are not. And in many ways, our time is more precious than a man's. And is there something to be said for maybe not advising? I went to a Catholic high school, but it was very much college prep. And no one would ever have said, well, do you want to go to college? Or you would never think to advise a male student versus a female student differently. And even saying that right now, it feels like a little bit uncomfortable. Like, is this 1950s? But these ideas, they end up hurting women. You know, we should be able to be honest, because so often a woman gets to her 30s or even her 40s, and consistently single women who are high earners around the age of 42, they are consistently the least happy people in the United States. And a woman is not a child. She can make these decisions for herself. But I think a lot of times, and I don't want to say too late, because I don't think it's ever too late for you as a child of God. I think if you're still on this earth, it's for a reason. But obviously, life is not all peachy keen. And I think a lot of times women realize too late, or later than might have been ideal, that they were lied to, because our culture lies to women. And again, we have this time clock, and I'm not saying women are only here to bear children, but it is the only thing women can do that men cannot do. So anything that you can do as a woman, a man's probably already done it. He's probably done it better. I mean, no offense, but he probably did it first. And another man or woman can come along and do it better after you, but no one else can do, as you know, bearing your children, your offspring. So I think that we would do well to be honest with women, and we're not. And I think it's sad. And I think a lot of women grow up and realize too late that they might have made different choices.
Right. Yeah, something you said there that struck me is that feminism, you didn't know it by the name because it was just the milieu. And we refer to that as the anti-white narrative. It's like the deep sea fish doesn't know he's in water because it's all he's ever known.
Exactly.
And that's all there is. So you were like everyone else. You were born into these acrimonious, deleterious ideas that were harmful to you without you knowing. And essentially what I hear you saying, what I like to articulate, is that women have not really been given a choice. They haven't been given the information for the other side, like that you can live this wonderful life by way of this other path that many others have trod before you. And that deep into their years, all the way to their dying days, are very happy people and surrounded by those who love them. Would you like to have that? Or would you like to be in the boardroom and fighting it out for the wealth of your boss and that person's boss and that person's boss? The women are just not told that. And you mentioned a thing about school, and it's fine. Listen, my audience, this community, you could say like women shouldn't be allowed to vote, they shouldn't be allowed to leave the house, or whatever you want. They're going to be fine with it. Yeah. But we get it. I mean, did you have any thoughts to what I was just saying, especially about the choice?
Yeah. Well, another thing is, you know, I'm not against women working in the home, but I think a woman can have a career after, when her children are a bit older or out of the house completely. Again, we're not dead when we stop being able to bear children. It's just that we might do things in reverse from men, you know, focus on family first and then career or whatever it is. But yeah, I do think in a lot of ways, it's like the pro-choice movement. It's really not about choice. It's about pushing one option. And I think in many ways, obviously feminism is tied to the pro-choice movement, but it's not really about choice. It's about pushing women to be outside the home, and then pushing us to, you know, deny and manipulate and control our biology to be exactly like a man, so that we can be outside the home and do everything a man can do. It really is. I mean, I say this often, and I know I'm not the first person to say it, I'm sure, but if it is a man's world that we live in, it is feminism that has propped up that man's world, because we are all literally just trying to be men, and a woman will always be a second-rate man. She's always going to be a better woman before she's going to be a better man. Yes, exactly. And we're all trying to be men right now. And you're so right. You said it better than me, that it's just the milieu. You don't even think that you're a feminist. You don't even really think about this. It's just, oh, of course I can do anything a man can do. And of course, you should have sex if you want to have sex. And of course, you should go to college just because you should go to college. I mean, of course, all these things, and we don't really question them. At least I didn't for a long time. I think a lot of people don't.
Yeah, the information is suppressed, and you know, continues to be suppressed. The reality about having females having multiple sex partners and what that does to their psychology, the pair bonding and the decreasing ability to pair bond, and the sort of neurosis that many women that we just know, we can speak from our lived experience, that the women we know that have had the most sex partners are the most sort of neurotic. They're very unhealthy individuals, and they're forever chasing this idea of power and this form of power. And since they don't have genuine masculinity, it just sort of manifests as bitchiness and vindictiveness and spitefulness. What do you think? Your latest video on Instagram is fantastic, and I recommend people watch that as soon as we're done here today in about 4 or so minutes. But talking about feminism laying the path for the trans movement, what do you think? I mean, to maybe take a little bit of a different angle, what do you think the trans movement has and is doing to feminism? Especially with men who are now claiming to be women and doing so much better in all of these different, female dominated, because all female environments.
Well, I'll answer that in a moment. I do want to go back to something you just said, because it's close to my heart. I do not think that you can be, a born again virgin or anything like this. That there's no theology behind that. But I do very much want women to know that there is always, first off, I think men and women should not be having indiscriminate sex, but it does affect women differently. And you and I have already discussed that, and we should be honest about that. But there's always forgiveness for you. There is redemption. Christ forgives. And I sometimes think, I don't want to sell this idea to women. Well, if you've done this much and your history is that much, then just stay on that side, because we don't want you. I sometimes I see that kind of on the conservative side, or I guess it's more the red pill side, whatever. And it sort of grates against me, because I think if the conservative side does not offer a message of hope and a message of life can be better, then we sort of lost, because the other side is going to take the sin and prop it up and not only not condemn you for the sin, but say, this is how you should be, and good on you for having this sin, so we'll praise you for the sin. So we are competing against that, but I'm not necessarily saying you wouldn't disagree with that, but I just always like to make that point, because I don't ever want to offer someone a message of hopelessness, especially when so much of our culture has been lying to so many of us. But as far as transgenderism, I mean, I as I say in the video, I think it's a natural outgrowth. Obviously, gender dysphoria has existed for a long time, not even close to the numbers that we're seeing now. It's like 0.01% of the population, almost exclusively young boys. And they almost always grow out of it at puberty and by adulthood. So, but it does exist as a mental disorder. But the trans craziness that we're seeing now, it seems like a natural outgrowth of feminism to me. And again, I'm sure I'm far from the first person to make this observation, because if we have been basically saying that men and women are the same for decades, and we're just thrown into different meat suits, then a man can be a woman and you can change your meat suit. I mean, to be crude about it, you can sew on this and cut off of that and whatever, because we're exactly the same. And it is a very weird, it's like an odd thing where they don't want to recognize that there is a soul, but this transgenderism sort of points to the idea that there is a soul, because you're saying you're a soul in the wrong body. It's a very odd thing, but I do think it was always bound to happen this way, because no one has any idea genuinely what a woman is. And I don't just mean not being able to say adult human female, but like, what is a woman? What does a woman do? How is she different than a man? What is femininity? What should a woman do? Not that women only have to do one thing. Most people, a lot of conservatives would even hesitate to answer, like, what is a woman and how is she different than a man? So and I do like to see it, though. I mean, I hate to see this transgender craze and what it's doing to children, but I like to see the angry feminists, who they call radical feminists, the TERFs, against the trans movement, this J.K. Rowling versus the trans movement. I like to see the breakdown. I do. I like to see the infighting. And these radical feminists, these old school feminists, these older women usually, they are too dumb, forgive me, to realize that they paved the way for this. Because if you put out the birth control and you put out the abortion and you tell women to do exactly what men do for decades, and you cheer on the sexual revolution and you give away sex for free, which is women's playing card in this. Life is not a game, but you're giving away sex for free. Why would a man necessarily commit to you? All of this, then yeah, of course you're going to have a lot of confused people, and you're going to have men crossing over to your side. And I like to see that they thought that they could stop it. They could say when this ends, oh, we just want this many rights and then we're done. But no, it turns out men are going to come over and they're going to take over your spaces, and vice versa. So I do like to see that breakdown.
It is fun. I love, in fact, I say when it comes to the transgenders, the male to female, there's one thing that I'm grateful for. I grew up with a lifetime, I guess like all little white boys across the West, of being told how better women are. Women are smarter. They can do everything a man can do better. They literally were telling us that. And it's just men preventing them from reaching these heights of achievement. And then come to find out, well, on Jeopardy, the #1 woman was born a man. When wrestling, the #1 female wrestler is born a man. Now, I just quickly, do they still consider anywhere gender dysphoria to be a disorder, or is that being mopped up by the left, the anti-whites, or I mean, is it?
I know not in the United States anymore, right? As far as the new DSM, it was reclassified.
Really?
But that is a relatively recent phenomenon. For a long time, it was a mental disorder. And it is still the only, that as far as I know, the only, whatever you want to call it, you don't want to call it disorder, fine. The only thing you can walk into a doctor's office and say, this is what I have, and this is the treatment that I would like. And the doctor just seems to go, okay. I've never had that happen. Right. You can suggest stuff, but the doctor offers his professional opinion. That doesn't happen anymore. And to be clear, like I said, I'm not laughing at the stuff that's happening with children. And I do think that if it does not stop now, which I don't have a lot of hope that it'll stop now, for the rest of your life and my life, we will see lawsuits, and it'll be bigger than, the COVID vaccine. This is the greatest medical scandal of our time, and it's horrific.
A lot of people being injured, and of course, with the ear against the door, we know there's a lot of support for the vaccine out there, and so we agree with everybody. The World Health Organization, the CDC, even if they disagree, we agree with them on their disagreement. So whatever it is, we all know how that works. But I do want to say we got to let you go because we used up our time with you. But I really appreciate you coming on. I hope you'll come back. We definitely are. You spoke right to my heart when you were talking about how the right has this like no place for people who have lived an actual life, and they want to be something else. They want to be something better. We actually sort of have a tagline that we are love, hope, and redemption. We know that everybody has lived a past. Everybody has a closet, and we're all damaged by this society, this anti-white society. We wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't have these wounds if it weren't for the environment that we grow up in. But there's a lot of material that I would like to cover with you. Maybe next time.
Yeah, same.
You had well, cool. We'll have you back for sure. Then I mean, I know you read White Fragility, right? And you read. So
I struggled through it.
Oh God. Yeah, that's a really crazy author. So yeah, we're gonna explore that as well. Your thoughts there. I think a little bit more on. We didn't get to touch upon abortion. We did mention how, and of course you can see right there, the right to choose is that right there is what we refer to as a meme pathogen. It's a concept that's harmful because it frames your thinking and in a way that is harmful for us, the victims of these people who want to do what they do, the evil that they do. But please tell folks where they can find you, Natalie. And I want everybody to head on over and hit subscribe on all of her different platforms.
I'm mostly active on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Also on Rumble and True Social. under some variation of Natalie Beisner or NJ Beisner or Natalie Jean Beisner. I didn't make it easy when I started all these, but if you search Natalie Beisner, I will probably be there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been
Thank
a splendid conversation, and we're gonna roll out now. But I look forward to chatting with you again in the future. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. I want you to reach out in love. I want you to let those brothers and sisters around the base, let them know that even though the anti-whites wield so much power, that we are winning every contest with them, and that it's only a matter of time. Tell them that they can be more than they are. Tell them that they can stand up for Western kind, Western civilization, and everyone who lives in Western civilization of all immutable characteristics. Tell them that there's a way that they can stand up for it in love, with the moral high ground. Be gentle with them at first. Coming out of a story that you thought was the real world is one of the hardest things that folks can do. If you go there with a true spirit and a true heart, with humility, you're going to win more souls than you'll ever turn away. And in the end, all of that will redound to the glory of our people and the reclamation of our destiny.